Vietnam. Tragedy struck a group of Indian tourists in Vietnam after a speedboat carrying employees and channel partners of mobile phone company Lava capsized near Phu Quoc Island. The boat, part of an annual company-sponsored incentive trip, was carrying 32 Indians and 4 crew members when it overturned, reportedly after being hit by a sudden wave. 15 Indians lost their lives in the accident, while local authorities managed to rescue 21 others. Most of the deceased were from Tamil Nadu, while others from Andhra Pradesh and Kerala. So that is of course what we're tracking currently. 15 Indians who lost their lives in a boating tragedy in Phu Quoc Island near Vietnam after their boat suddenly capsized. An investigation into the tragedy is of course underway, with the Vietnamese Prime Minister also ordering an urgent inquiry. We in fact have with us Ambassador Aftab Seth, former diplomat who served as Ambassador of India to Greece, Vietnam and Japan, joining us on the broadcast. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Of course, a major tragedy that took place in Vietnam. 15 Indians who lost their lives in this incident, and while an investigation into the incident and what exactly happened is still underway, coordination between the two nations of course comes first and foremost during such a time. What do you think is the first priority for India currently, following the death of 15 nationals and several others that have been left injured due to this incident?
Yes, well, of course, it is a terrible tragedy. But if I might, in this moment of grief, make a slightly positive statement, and that is that it is a good thing in a way that this terrible tragedy has occurred in the friendly country of Vietnam, with which we have had a solid friendship going back at least several centuries, but in the modern era, at least 100 years, from 1926, when Motilal Nehru met Ho Chi Minh in Brussels during the Oppressed Nationalities Conference. And after that, Prime Minister Nehru and President Ho Chi Minh established a warm and trusting relationship which has persisted over the years. And as you see, the people who suffered this tragedy were part of a group of highly qualified engineers, because the relationship in the last 26 years since I stopped being ambassador in Vietnam has moved exponentially. And today we have so many tourists from India visiting Vietnam, about 7 lakhs, I'm told, in the last year. And in the first few months of this year, we're already up to about 5 lakhs. So it's a huge number. And the reason for this is, unlike the time when I was ambassador, when we had to always fly through Bangkok, as there were no direct flights, now we have direct flights to 5 Indian cities, including Bangalore and Madras and Delhi, and to 3 of the important cities of Vietnam, which is the capital Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, the premier city in the south, and Da Nang, which is in central Vietnam, close to the Chum temples, which were built by people from India over 1,000 years ago. So these are historic places, and now the relationship has moved to much higher levels. Of course, the defense relationship and intelligence sharing has been part of our Vietnam-India story for the last 30 or more years. And in fact, during my 4 years there, the defense relationship went up extraordinarily, with both our Raksha Mantri George Fernandes visiting Vietnam and the Vietnamese defense minister visiting India. And we had Vietnamese officers training at Wellington, at the NDA in Delhi, and we had our officers going to Vietnam to study jungle warfare, in which the Vietnamese excelled. And we have been most supportive of Vietnam during their critical years of independence. You will recall that Ho Chi Minh had a wonderful defense minister called Vo Van Zap, who was the mastermind behind the defeat of the French in 1954 in Dien Bien Phu. And the first prime minister to visit Vietnam to celebrate this great victory was Prime Minister Nehru. They have never forgotten that. And Ho Chi Minh came to India when we established diplomatic relations in 1958 and established the first consulate of Vietnam in India. And all through that terrible tragedy, India was the chairman of the International Control Commission with Poland and Canada. And we saw through the 50s assiduously to bring peace to war-torn Indochina, which included Laos and Cambodia. So the tragedy has taken place in a country where we have a multi-dimensional relationship. We are big in pharmaceuticals. We have been one of the first countries to be allowed to drill for oil. The ONGC, the Oil and Natural Gas Commission of India, got one of the first areas of the ocean off the central coast of Vietnam to be the first people to look for oil and gas in the rich seas around Vietnam. We have been involved with their fisheries. M.S. Swaminathan, our great agricultural scientists, helped to set up the Kulong Rice Research Institute in the Mekong Delta. We have been involved in ocean collaboration with our institute in Goa, dealing with the Vietnamese Institute in Nha Trang and in Haiphong. It's a multi-dimensional relationship. And we've had visits at the summit level going on steadily for the last 25, 30, 40 years, in fact. So while mourning the tragedy that has overtaken these bright young men and women who were there to collaborate with Vietnam on this new venture, which makes laptops and mobile phones and all sorts of things. And in the reverse direction, the Vietnamese are running a company in our capital, which runs entirely electrically operated motor cars, which contributes to keep our capital city clean. So the Vietnamese and the Indians are collaborating so closely that I have very little doubt that we will get the maximum assistance at the highest levels in Vietnam. Of course, our own ambassador there, my successor several times removed, will be working steadily, but he will depend almost entirely on the goodwill and expertise and the friendship, the genuine friendship that the Vietnamese feel towards India and vice versa. We have nothing but goodwill towards Vietnam, and they reciprocate it amply and in full measure. And I have very little doubt that we will get the maximum support in trying to overcome this terrible tragedy which has overtaken so many Indian families who have lost their loved ones in the seas of Vietnam. And it's not an everyday occurrence in Vietnam. They're very safety conscious. They are aware of the hazards of the natural environment in their country. And they would, I'm sure, do everything possible to bring succor and sustenance and comfort to those who have lost their lives and to the families who are so bereaved on this occasion. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Of course, thank you for sharing your experience as well, and the relations between the two countries, as you said, are extremely friendly. How important do you think that becomes during such a time? Because we've seen some reports saying that certain safety procedures were not followed. It is alleged that there was some amount of overcrowding. Some guests were not wearing life jackets. Now, of course, this was a private company that was operating this service. But how do we go about addressing these concerns with Vietnamese authorities, and what are some lessons that we can learn from this incident?
Well, the biggest lesson we should learn is that when we venture forth on such trips, as you yourself said, some of them were not wearing life jackets. Now, when you're venturing out into choppy seas, that's one of the first precautions that one should take. I'm not sure whether there will be enough life jackets or not, but this is something that, the authorities there will have to investigate and come to a conclusion. But what I want to underline is the Vietnamese authorities, the Vietnamese government, the Communist Party chairman of the People's Committees of the area will, I am certain, be rendering all possible help to overcome this tragedy and to investigate the causes of what happened. We are in a very friendly country there.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us during this time of tragedy. Of course, the Indian Embassy has also stated that it is in close coordination with authorities, and Vietnam itself has initiated an urgent inquiry into the situation. We'll keep tracking those developments, of course. Currently, we're running short on time, but thank you so much for speaking with us and joining us here on NewsX.
May I extend my condolences to the bereaved families on this sad occasion.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. With that, we